Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hi, Barry.
Hi. So we mentioned something last episode, which is I mentioned something last episode about how we have a different framework now of dating post the Me Too conversation. Also, now the Me Too conversation has become part of the languaging, at least I hope it still is. Because what I mean is that we've had, before that point, a lot of hidden agendas, a lot of mistreatment of women by men, not generally speaking, but enough isolated cases that have made women more fearful and men more concerned about how do we approach. And because of now Me Too's made it more visible, more public, I think a lot more men are being, I won't say cautious, but I'm not sure how to approach a woman without feeling like they can cross that line and step over that nice place. Well, it's almost like nice guy to bad boy. No, I don't use that term. That's one my own languaging. But to step into a place where we don't respect the woman the way we want to.
You know, it's a fascinating subject, and not only for me, having being in the dating world for many years. Sorry, 64 years old now. I think I started dating in my mid-teens, um, and yeah, I mean that Me Too movement. It was a long time coming. I mean, I could identify with so many of those situations for myself, not just in the work environment, but just in general. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but or if you would have even experienced this, but in the UK, growing up, if there was a work site as a young girl, I
Yeah.
would rather walk a mile out of my way than walk past a building site. The cat calls, the sexualizing a young child. I mean, I was pretty well developed by the time I was 14, and it was horrendous. Quite honestly, it was absolutely horrendous to be objectified like that. Um, and then again in the workforce as well. I worked in Hollywood. I was a costume designer for many years, and I was hit on by many powerful directors and producers. And um, yeah, it's a very, and I don't even know if a man could ever fully understand what that feels like. What would you say about that, Barry?
Um, I don't. I would never presume that I would understand exactly how it feels. I definitely can appreciate how it. I can appreciate how you feel because the thing is, I can feel in myself that the what's the word I'm looking for? I was going to say reticence is the right word, but a sense of just like I can feel the horror almost myself, even though it's not my experience. So I definitely can
Mhm.
feel that. I mean, I remember in my 20s and 30s in business that, and this is the thing, is that I'm the way that the men collectively talked about any girl they saw, it was like a wolf pack,
Mhm.
looking at prey, looking at a deer, they're going to pounce on sort of thing. And they had this such a, uh, say vociferous isn't the right, or I'm like, words popping up, they're not fitting what I want to say. Bloodthirsty, that's a good way of putting it. Energetic that I just didn't feel comfortable with. So even though in that environment, I was one of the guys, so to speak, I couldn't play full out the way they did because there's such a sense of wrongness about it for me. It's always been the way for me I've been because I mean, I spent my teen years being very close to the girls I was growing up with because I was being bullied by the boys. So being
Mhm.
among the guys as an adult, I didn't go along automatically with what they were feeling, but I could see those lines being crossed, and I could see the lack of respect and appreciation that now has become thankfully more public. But so definitely
Mhm.
that's not a pretty sight to watch.
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that. I've often thought, I mean, what keeps popping into my head as well is like, I may not have met Jeffrey Epstein himself, but I met many Jeffrey Epsteins. Again, when I was a very young girl, older men, 45, 50-year-old men coming on to, a 15-year-old child, and in a very aggressive manner. It was rampant back then, and but I love what you're saying, and it really, I would often think, and I never wanted to be with men like that. I never wanted to be with sort of macho men that talked in that way, I used to like think if you were into sports, you were going to be in those locker rooms talking about women in that really derogatory way. So I was
Yeah.
never attracted to that type of man.
Hmm.
Um, but I often used to think to myself, you obviously came onto this earth through a woman. Why would you, if you, I mean, I'm assuming that they've had, I shouldn't assume that at all. I don't think every man that behaves in that way has had an unhealthy relationship with his mother, or maybe they have a sister. I
No,
don't know how
it
they can
wasn't.
separate that out.
It my perception again, and I
Mhm.
wasn't raised with sisters. Just to be clear, yes, I had a mother, but sisters. So I didn't have a lot of that energetic. But I know very clearly that for a lot of boys and then a lot of men, there was a boundary. One
Mhm.
side was family, and then one side was the free market, so to speak. And
Mm.
so the perception of women that way, because first of all, for most men, most boys, their mother and their sisters were not attracted to them on that level. So it was like
Mhm.
and in fact, it was really the women that were attracted to that were in the crosshairs, so to speak.
Sure.
So that was, I think, where the shift was, and why boys and men were able to do that because they were not connecting the two up. They weren't looking at the lens of like, well, these girls are like my mother, sort of thing, or their
Mhm.
sister. Even though they didn't see it that way.
Yeah, they were able to compartmentalize very well there.
Yeah,
Um, and the other thing is, we're talking about dating after the Me Too movement, and I know a lot of men feel sort of unsure how when is it crossing a boundary, and um, I think many people sort of know when they're not picking up on social cues, and I think those people that did violate those boundaries with women earlier that were affected by them, overzealous, over pushy, over insistent men. Um, I think it just that awareness we keep talking about, that men should just be very aware. Like I said, I have two sons, 26 and almost 30. And I've never lectured them on how to be in a relationship with a woman. I have we've always had a very close relationship, and all I've ever said is, I want you to love whoever you love. I don't care if it's male, female, whoever. Just be loving and respectful in all of your relationships. And I will often overhear the boys talking about subjects, and one's a philosopher and the other so they like to talk about things all the time. And I'm so proud to say they have such strong boundaries of how a woman should be treated. And I know that they would never let anything happen if they had been drinking. I'm talking about when you first start dating, and
yeah,
you've just met and you've been drinking, but if there's even any slight suggestion that the woman they were with had been drinking, that like nothing happens,
yeah,
totally stone cold sober before you go in that direction in a relationship, because God forbid that person would turn around and say I didn't really mean it, or so that's something that and I never said that to my children, particularly, but I'm really glad that they have that rule for themselves. And I'm sure it's not just them, I'm sure it's their generation
yeah. I
are.
was going to say
Yeah,
that. If
I
you're,
think they're hyper aware of that now.
I think to be honest, it's the slightly older men, like
Hmm.
30, 35 and up, who have probably had some bad habits that they haven't maybe learned from.
Hmm.
But yes, that idea about respect and honoring is such a key part of this. And I think maybe the best suggestion in a way is to, when you go on a date, first of all, realize the person in front of you is an equal. Because that's one of the problems a lot of men have not admitted to, is the fact they don't see women as equals or haven't in the past. And by so doing, you recognize that you have to talk to somebody like that equally, as in respectful, as in clean, as in you ask questions, you don't assume anything.
Yeah.
These are things that basically men have done badly in the past where they crossed the line because they didn't check in, they didn't ask, they didn't consider the person in front of them was worthy of their respect because they were trained or educated or even informed by society that it was okay to just assume and just take charge, take ownership without any level of respect. And the challenge is for a lot of women, they thought that was okay because they were raised in a situation where they were supposed to be supplicant that way. And it's like,
Hmm.
no. So in a way, what Me Too has done, thankfully, has woken up both sides of the conversation. So that women, and I'm going to be careful I say this, there's an array of women who have responded to the Me Too in different ways. Some are
Mm,
some are wounded massively who are doing healing work. Some are understanding how to use that as a tool in communication, and some have weaponized it against men.
mhm.
So there's a range of how women are responding, and men on the other side have got their own experience too. For men like myself, and there are more than a few of us out there who are saying, thankfully, this has now become understood, so that now other men maybe can join us in being respectful and being honored of the women we're around, regardless of dating.
Yeah.
So
And
men,
also just to put in here too, it's not just women who have suffered from the Me Too movement. You know,
mhm,
there are young men or that have been in those situations where they were taken advantage of. I mean, we hear it with certain male and female actors taking advantage of a younger person in that environment. And so I just wanted to clarify that it was, we all think of the Harvey Weinstein situation and all the women that came forward and spoke, but that did open the door for a lot of young men to come forward too and say, "Hey, I was taken advantage of by somebody that was more powerful than I was, either in a work environment or something like that." Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I think, and that I like you touched on culture. I mean,
mhm,
unfortunately, gosh, I mean, fairy tales. I'm just like, I pull my hair out sometimes. It's like,
right,
you know, the or even I'm thinking of sort of Heathcliff and or Jane Eyre and these difficult, powerful men and these subservient women that want these powerful men to sort of whisk them off their feet and take
mhm,
control. And so society and Beauty and the Beast and things. It's like sometimes we're just you know girls are primed for that rescue fantasy of a big strong man taking over, and then men sort of get like, oh, hang on a minute, is that how I'm supposed to be with a woman?
yeah,
And, and then it's like, so again, but then there's also, I mean, I think that's the innocent part that can sometimes happen, the flirting and the things like that. But then there's the really, the travesty of a Harvey Weinstein situation or a Jeffrey Epstein situation,
right,
things like that, that have, where they are truly narcissistic men that do not see women as human beings, never mind anything else. They are an object to serve, and as a narcissist, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, you know, um, their whole agenda is getting their needs met and taking advantage of somebody, getting the high of being in control and dominating, and also the conquest of getting somebody to have sex with them, whether they like it or not, is
mhm,
perceived as a conquest. So it was so important that it has come into the light and is being discussed, and that we are raising healthier children that know how
right,
to love and respect and listen to each other.
yeah.
Mm,
That's the shift that we've been needing for a long time. I mean, if we go back a few hundred years, women were in charge of other places too. But we've, especially the last 150, 200, 300 years, there's been a shift that's put the men into this patriarchal structure where women are, in quotes, the second class citizens.
mhm,
And so, unfortunately, we have got a societal and cultural change we're going through now, finally, that allows us to see each other as equals. Because I think, frankly, for the future of our human race, just as a soapbox moment,
mhm,
um, is that our future depends upon us seeing each other equally. But it does make dating a shifting culture, and that's the other part, is that because we said, okay, this is the way it's going to be now, equal rights and everything else, great. But then how do we talk to each other when we go on dates? Who does lead? Who does follow? Who does do this? Who does that? It's the interesting
mhm,
thing. I mean, one of the things I need to go back to, I haven't done it for a long time. I started studying Argentine tango a while ago just to learn a bit more about how to dance because I was
mhm.
close to doing it. But the thing was, in Argentine tango, the way I was taught, it really became such a visceral thing for me because right when I was deep into the masculine and feminine conversation, is that in Argentine tango, the masculine partner leads by creating a structure and a frame, which is a very manly, masculine thing to do.
Mhm,
The feminine chooses into that frame and follows it in terms of letting herself be led because when she's being led, she's free to do other things. Because in the Argentine tango, the sexiest part of the dance is the woman. The way
mhm,
she way she flips and moves around because she's relying and trusting the man's solidity in his structure, the frame he carries for her, so that she can move freely if she wants to move. And so the understanding is there is equality there, but it's not the same thing, meaning
Mm-hmm.
that what he does and what she does are different, but they work because of each other.
Yeah.
He looks because of her in a way. And yes, he does. They switch around the dancing where both do the flair and such like that. But the understanding in dating, I think we have to get to the point where we finally get it's okay. It's required that we have respect for the differences and the fact that we can actually have a dance that works for both partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're so right there. And I'm just a couple of things you're talking about. And um, I did an interview earlier this week on a podcast called "The Pilot's Wife," and
Mm,
it was she was talking about that, the dance of, you have this pilot husband who is flying and doing his thing, and that, you're basically, as his wife, manning the ship at home and doing everything, and then when they come home, they start to sort of micromanage what you're doing. And she was saying, well, I don't come in your cockpit and start telling you how to fly the plane, you know. And it is, and we talked about, and you will, I'm sure, remember this from USM as well, but that whole sort of agreements versus expectations, that's where we get really sticky in
yeah.
any relationship. Too much assumption has been made, not enough agreements are made. And also, society makes it sound like it's not romantic um, if we don't sort of silently let us be led. Sometimes you've just got to have conversations. You've got to,
Mhm.
like, I personally, I love that my partner opens the car door for me still. I just love that. And but in the same time, this, I would say we are completely equal, and
Mhm.
on many ways, in financially, everything like that. But there's certain little things we do for each other that are very sweet, and sort of maybe a little old fashioned in some way. But but it's a dance, again, a dance where
Exactly.
he feels wonderfully appreciated, and I feel cherished, and we just have that agreement. But we communicate very, very well on what makes us feel good. And I'm very tuned into what makes him feel good. And oh, I know
Mhm.
what we were going to talk about. We'll talk about it another time. But the different love languages, the different
Oh yeah.
love languages, we'll do
Yes.
that. We'll do
Yes.
that coming up. But it's understanding each other's love language, understanding how each one wants to feel within the relationship, and I'm being generous and kind and wanting to give that person the love that they can take in and feel. So, but yeah, this whole new way of dating, I think it's a wonderful way to reimagine it, have it much more transparent, not as somewhat guesswork. Poor guys going, oh, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to kiss her, or do I ask if I can kiss her, or what do I do? But if we just have more transparency, more communication,
Mhm.
and everybody will feel a lot safer in the relationship.
I would say it's one of the biggest keys of this new paradigm we find ourselves in, which is it's okay to ask questions.
Yeah, yeah.
And make sure you ask intelligent questions, by the way. Because the thing is, that, like the idea about kissing, for example, you know, back in the day, maybe it was like the guy was supposed to take charge and like lean in for the kiss before she was ready, which is
Hmm.
not what we're doing anymore because we understand better. But it's I don't think there's anything unsexy if a man asks a woman or leans into her and said, I'd really like to kiss you. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Rather than just going in for the kiss when she's like, whoa, we haven't got that far yet.
exactly.
So I mean, it sounds simplistic, but the thing is, and I want to say this again as a reminder for the men, it doesn't emasculate you to ask a question.
Hmm.
Okay to ask questions. In fact, nowadays, I think it's more important to ask the woman, the questions that help her feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
That's really part of the conversation nowadays because it's no longer assumptive that men can just do whatever they want and screw anybody else. It's like,
Hmm.
no, we are in this dance now. And yes, each partner functions differently, but each partner needs to be included in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Because I'm thinking, I mean, obviously, I've been with my same partner now for 13 years, so there's no, can I lean in and kiss you? But
You've got that one already.
but
Cross the
if
bridge, so to speak.
Exactly. But if I was out there again in the dating field and somebody, and I was on a first date, second date, whatever, with somebody, and if they leant in to kiss me, option number one or option number two, saying, "Would you mind? I find you so beautiful. Would you mind if I kissed you?" I would be that's such more it's much more romantic and loving, to
Yes.
be asked in that way than just somebody going, "I'm gonna sort of land on your lips here." So, um, yeah,
But the
I
thing
think.
is that's the thing. I want to make sure we get this point. This is such a simple thing we're talking about, but it's
Mhm,
the example for everything when it comes to communication and dating nowadays.
mhm,
Just the and like you said with your partner, you love the opens the door. I mean, that's one of my things too. Is I love to open the door for a woman if it's a friend of mine or if I'm dating her, whatever it is. Because to me, it's a sign of deference and respect, not because I think she can't do it. Because that's the
yeah,
other part. I'm going to get upset with that one. It's like, no, I know you can open the door for yourself. However, I want to take advantage of the fact that I can be that kind and respectful to help you by opening the door for you, so you can, be more relaxed and be taken care of. And that's
mhm,
the thing is that I said that I posted, I did a blog about this, God, 5, 6 years ago. Is if gentlemanly conduct is a is an no. Oh yeah, something about if is gentlemanly conduct going extinct,
mhm,
because it seemed like it was becoming ignored, suppressed, forgotten about, or just even argued with. And I feel like because of now, because of Me Too conversation, in fact, I think it's been renewed because we need to remember how to be, for us men, how to be chivalrous, how to be gentlemanly, how to be respectful, out of reverence and respect for our partners.
mhm,
Because that's the thing we've forgotten to do because we've become so assumptive in the past. So,
exactly. And again, it goes both ways. Pay attention to what the little things that, make your partner feel loved on the other, on the other
please,
side.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, so tell me more. You're out there in the dating world. So what are the
Oh,
other challenges after the Me Too movement? What are the other challenges you've been met with or conversations you've had with women?
well, one of the things and this is actually a practice I've done for a long time, but I realize it does come into account now because of post Me Too, is the first, and I talk about this with my clients too, is about is when you go out with somebody for the first time, whether through a dating app or through social media, you met them or you cross them at an event, is have a mutually, I'll say safe is the right word, but a mutually neutral environment to meet in, meaning that you don't go to a fancy restaurant, you don't, and the men ideally don't pick her up on the first time you meet her. Like you meet somewhere center where you both drive yourself or get an Uber to the same place to meet up. I recommend, frankly, because of what's been happening in the past, you do something daytime, public, economical, because so that way you're not feel like you owe anybody anything,
Mhm.
and fun to do. Whether it's like playing mini golf or going for coffee or going for ice cream or going for a walk along the pier, something public, so that key thing, she can feel safe.
Mhm.
Part of this Me Too stuff is for a lot of women has really just outed the fact that a lot of women haven't felt safe around men, understandably. So part of what I recommend for female clients and for male clients is when you go on the first date, have what I would call almost like a pre-date. So the pressure of the first date is taken off the burner, so we can
Mhm.
actually do a chance to get to know each other and have something that's lighthearted and fun. And you go, you know what? Let's go on a real date, a romantic date after this,
Yeah.
because that is a healthier way of doing things.
That's a great suggestion, and I know the same thing after my divorce, I was so like, "Oh my god, how do I go on a date again after 20 years? This is so alien to me." But it really is, very simple. Do not meet people at your home in the beginning at all for a long time. Actually, really get to know them. And secondly, I went on dates to expand my social circle, is the way I put it. Wasn't to meet the one. So
Right.
it really was just about I'm going out to meet more friends to just expand my social circle. And it
Mhm.
took such pressure off that, um, you know, does he like me? Because I think we can lose ourselves in those. It's like an interview. It's like, am I making a good impression? Do they like me? Well, if that gets taken off and it's just more about, well, am I enjoying getting to know this person, and and paying attention to the red flags too, for sure. But I like what you said. Don't, and sometimes women make the mistake. I have some clients that, I can see that they are allowing people to come to their home too soon. And, and that's something I think we should all be cautious of. Just know who you're letting into your space. And when I say know them, I think personally at least a month or so before they come in your space.
Well, the thing is nowadays, that what I've noticed, for example, is that you can now make phone calls and video calls through almost every single platform now, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or the dating apps. Most of the dating apps have a built-in feature where you can actually do a video call or a phone call inside the app, which I
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend because, as you're saying, like for women to feel safe, especially with the dating apps where you don't know the person by any means or any way of connection, before you give out your phone number, even because frankly, you don't want to get stalkers on chasing after you, is have a way of connecting through a neutral platform. Because that way you can communicate and go, okay, this person's real. This person's nice. Let's go meet somewhere.
Yeah.
Versus, oh, this guy's a creep. Let me block him now. You
Mm.
know, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. And also just a sidebar, which is not for a conversation we're going to have anytime soon, as far as I'm aware about it. There are a lot of scammers in the dating apps too, which makes life even more interesting. So having that contained environment to communicate through, again, audio, video, you get to see first, is that person real? Do they match the profile? Because if it's a fake, they won't do that. And
Hmm.
secondly, is this person someone I actually want to meet in real life? Is it worth my time, energy, and investment to go meet them in real life?
Yeah.
Because you now know that it's worth doing. So to definitely have those choices made in a smart way, so you don't give away the farm, so to speak, too early.
Hmm.
The thing is, that was some of the old paradigm we were in, where basically there was an expectation, like, if I do this for you, you should do this for me, which is why I said you meet someone neutrally and have a cheap date, because so many men have gotten this wide in their system that when you go on a first date with a woman, you spend lots of money on her with a restaurant and wine and everything else, she's going to owe you something,
Mm.
which is not true. But that's assumption. That's the old assumptive thinking.
Yeah.
And so these pieces of the shift I'm talking about is that and for me personally, I don't mind either because it's cheaper for me. But if I'm going on several dates over a few weeks, different women,
Hmm.
I don't really want to spend, lots of money on a date every single time, because that's not going to be good for my preference.
Hmm.
And then they're going to, it makes it less indebted.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a great conversation and one to be continued because there is lots of dating advice between the two of us. I know that I had
I mean, the thick of
many,
it, yeah.
many relationships before I married, and only a couple afterwards. But as I
Yep.
say, very brief. But then my partner for 13 years. But boy, those first. I have lots of experiences back then, but we can dive deeper into some of the mistakes we make
We
in
have lots of more
dating.
content. Yes, and plenty of content for the future episodes. We will definitely have things
Yes,
to talk about.
we do. Okay, well, this was so much
All right.
fun again, Barry. I will
Likewise.
see you next week.
See you next
Take
week.
care.
Take care of yourself.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode, fresh and shiny, as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.